The scent of lavender hung in the air, a gentle perfume that could barely mask the chill of the surroundings. The stark, impersonal white walls, the austere furnishings, and the cold lighting created an atmosphere of confinement, a stark contrast to the vivid memories of a home brimming with color and laughter. Dona Clara, her once vibrant hair now a silvery gray, sat in a wheelchair that seemed to have aged with her, gazing out the window. The sky beyond, a limpid blue, was an invitation to a freedom denied to her. Each sunbeam that pierced the window's thin bars seemed to mock her seclusion. The days dragged on in an oppressive monotony, punctuated by the hurried footsteps of nurses and the heavy silence that enveloped her when she was alone. Loneliness was a constant companion, a burden she bore with silent dignity, yet one that weighed heavily on her soul. The reason for her stay there was a painful knot in her throat, a wound that refused to heal. Her own daughter, to whom she had dedicated her life, whom she had raised with unconditional love, whom she had shielded from the world's dangers, had decided this was the best place for her. The decision, made without consultation, without genuine dialogue, had struck her like lightning from a clear sky. The words, uttered with a coldness she never imagined emanating from her own flesh and blood, echoed in her mind like a lament. "It's for your own good, Mum. You can't look after yourself anymore." The tone was one of implacable certainty, an authority that stripped her of her autonomy, of her very identity. Here, in this sterile place, she was no longer Clara, the woman who built an empire with her own hands, the mother who loved with the strength of 1,000 sons, the grandmother who overflowed with affection. She was merely an incapable elderly woman, a burden to be managed. However, beneath the surface of apparent fragility, something deeper and unexpected was stirring. An ancestral strength, forged in years of adversity and resilience, began to awaken. The humiliation, the pain of rejection, the blatant injustice, all of it mingled into a bitter cocktail, but also a catalyst. That confinement, imposed with the intention of erasing her existence, was, paradoxically, reigniting a dormant fire. The realization that her daughter, in her supposed concern, had disregarded the essence of who she was, the strength that moved her, the intelligence that had guided her throughout her life, ignited a spark of indignation. An indignation that sought not revenge, but self-affirmation. A visceral need to prove that her daughter's simplistic and limited view was terribly mistaken. What her daughter didn't know, what no one there knew, was the extent of the life Clara had lived, the depth of her struggles, and the sturdiness of her foundations. The world her daughter knew was but a minuscule fraction of the reality Clara had shaped and inhabited. The walls of that institution, designed to contain and silence, were, in fact, a flimsy curtain, poised to be torn asunder. The fragility her daughter perceived was armor, a carefully constructed guise to navigate a world that, in its youth, had challenged her in ways her descendant could never conceive. Her daughter's naivete was a mirror reflecting her own blindness, an inability to see beyond superficial appearances. That sanctuary of silence and conformity was the perfect stage for an awakening. An awakening that would not arrive with fanfare or thunderous revolts, but with the subtlety and precision of a meticulously orchestrated plan. The mind that had once charted multi-million-dollar business strategies, that had anticipated market movements with unnerving clarity, was now focused on a new objective: to rewrite her own narrative. Humiliation was transforming into determination, pain into fuel. With each passing day, while the outside world deemed her forgotten and powerless, Dona Clara was, in truth, weaving a new reality, one that began with the perception of a hidden truth, a secret that would change everything. The journey commencing there, within those frigid walls, was not merely a quest for physical liberation, but a profound exploration of identity, resilience, and the true meaning of familial love. It was a tale of how appearances can deceive, how inner strength can blossom in the darkest of hours, and how, at times, those who love us most can be the ones who understand us least. Dona Clara's apparent vulnerability was merely the prelude to a revelation that would shake the very foundations of her daughter's perception, and perhaps, of all those around her, proving that a person's worth lies not in their apparent capacity for self-care, but in the wisdom and fortitude they carry within their heart and mind, irrespective of age or circumstance. The afternoon sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, an ephemeral spectacle that Dona Clara observed with a newfound serenity. That closing of the day, once a harbinger of another lonely night, now carried a different weight. It was the prelude to a shift, the promise of a tomorrow where truth would surface. Her daughter's innocence, her inability to see beyond the veil of fragility, was both the source of her anguish and the key to her own rebirth. That place, which should have been the end of her autonomy, would in fact be the stage for her most audacious display of power, a power derived not from accumulated fortunes, but from a profound understanding of human nature and the unshakable strength of spirit. Dona Clara's story was only just beginning to unfold, and its pages would reveal a richness far greater than any material treasure. The air within the respite clinic was heavy, a medley of disinfectant and the faded fragrance of flowers that had long since seen better days. Dona Clara, her gnarled hands resting atop the thin blanket covering her legs, gazed out at the urban landscape through the window. The tall, impersonal buildings clawed at the sky, a constant reminder of the world outside, a world that now seemed so remote. The call to adventure had not arrived with the fanfare of trumpets, but with the cold finality of a stamp on a legal document, a unilateral decision that had deposited her here, far from her home, her memories, her life. Her daughter, Helena, in an act of misguided concern, had orchestrated her admission, convinced that her mother's independence had become a liability. Helena, burdened by her own life's battles and pressures, perceived Dona Clara's routine as a perilous labyrinth, rather than a testament to her resilience. The house, once a sanctuary of cherished memories, now felt like territory to be conquered, a place where Dona Clara could no longer exert her command, however tacit. The initial shock was overwhelming. The sensation of being stripped of her autonomy, of having her capacity for judgment questioned by her own daughter, was a profound blow. The world she knew, which she had helped to build with her intellect and perseverance, seemed to crumble around her. The fragility Helena projected onto her was an armor Dona Clara did not require, a mask she had never worn. The initial days were a trial of endurance. The clinic's regimen, rigid and impersonal, contrasted starkly with the freedom Dona Clara had always held dear. The pitying glances of the staff, the repetitive inquiries about her well-being, all fueled a burgeoning sense of powerlessness. Helena visited her regularly, but their encounters were marked by a painful superficiality. She brought flowers, recounted details of her day, but skirted around the crux of the matter, the decision that had driven them apart. Dona Clara felt the distance between them widening, a chasm not merely physical, but emotional. She attempted to explain, to reassert her capabilities, but her words seemed to fall into an abyss of paternalistic concern. The meeting with the mentor did not come in the guise of a wise elder, but in the forced introspection of her solitude. Amidst the monotony, she began to revisit her own experiences, the countless occasions on which she had overcome obstacles that had seemed insurmountable. She recalled her youth, how she had built her business from the ground up, facing skepticism and discrimination. She remembered how she had navigated the complexities of motherhood, balancing the demands of a career with her love for her daughter. The initial refusal of the call, the passive acceptance of her circumstances, began to give way to a quiet determination. The turning point occurred during a visit from Helena, where the conversation, once again, revolved around Dona Clara's security. Helena mentioned, almost casually, the difficulty in managing her mother's finances, the complexity of investments, and the need for more direct oversight. It was at this juncture that Dona Clara realized the extent of her daughter's misunderstanding. Helena didn't just see an elderly mother, but a financial asset to be managed. The truth, which Dona Clara had kept secret for years, not out of shame but discretion, was that her personal fortune, built through years of hard work and astute investment decisions, was considerably larger than Helena had ever imagined. Her investments, diversified and robust, made her one of the wealthiest women in her former social circle, a reality she never felt the need to flaunt. The modest house, the practical cars, the understated lifestyle were a deliberate choice, a reflection of her values, not her financial capacity. Helena's mention of finances was the trigger. It was time to cross the threshold, to leave behind passive acceptance and embrace the truth of her own strength. The decision was made. She would no longer be the fragile figure her daughter insisted on seeing. From that moment on, Dona Clara began to act with calculated discretion. She observed, she listened, and, crucially, she planned. Each interaction with Helena became a test, an opportunity to gauge the depth of her daughter's ignorance regarding her true situation. She started posing subtle questions about investments, about the market, testing Helena's knowledge while simultaneously reaffirming her own intellectual acumen. The tension mounted with each visit, each superficial conversation. Dona Clara knew that a direct approach, a confession of her wealth, could be misinterpreted, seen as an attempt at control or manipulation. The moral quandary was clear: how to reveal the truth without further damaging the relationship with her daughter, without appearing to be boasting or, worse, seeking retribution. She needed to find a path that honored her dignity while simultaneously opening Helena's eyes. The fragility Helena projected onto her was a shield, but also a burden, and Dona Clara felt the imperative to shed it, not just for her own sake, but so that Helena could truly see her. The climactic moment arrived with unexpectedness, yet with the precision of a finely tuned orchestra. Helena was visiting Dona Clara, who was visibly stressed by the financial woes of her own company. Amidst a discussion about debts and precarious investments, Dona Clara, with a disarming calm, retrieved a small notebook from her handbag. She opened it to a specific page, replete with figures and charts she had meticulously prepared. "Helena," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I've been observing your concerns. And I have a plan." She then proceeded to detail, with striking lucidity and a profound grasp of the financial market, an investment strategy that would not only resolve Helena's immediate predicaments, but also secure long-term stability. Helena was dumbfounded. The woman she had believed incapable of managing her own finances was, in fact, proffering a masterful financial blueprint. The reward for overcoming her own ordeal was not an object, but a glimpse of truth in her daughter's eyes. The revelation was not about the quantum of wealth she possessed, but about the unyielding capability of her mind and spirit. The agony of forced institutionalization transformed into a catharsis, a moment of profound reconciliation not with the situation, but with her very identity. Dona Clara's revelation irrevocably altered the mother-daughter dynamic. Helena, initially stunned and perhaps a touch ashamed, began to perceive her mother in an entirely new light. The armor of frailty she had constructed for herself crumbled, revealing the strong, insightful woman who had always been present. Helena's subsequent visits became imbued with greater significance, filled with genuine conversations about finances, investments, and, crucially, about life itself. Dona Clara, for her part, sought neither to flaunt her affluence nor to boast of her acumen. Her satisfaction lay in the restoration of her autonomy and the re-establishment of an authentic connection with her daughter. The path back was not an escape from the clinic, but a gradual transition towards mutual understanding. Dona Clara, with Helena's support, decided to return home, not as a person to be cared for, but as a partner in her own life. The scars of the experience remained, a poignant reminder of the fragility of familial bonds and the paramount importance of open communication, but also of the resilience that can be unearthed amidst adversity. Dona Clara returned to her home, not as the same woman who had been taken to the clinic, but transformed by the experience. The narrative of her incapacity was undone, replaced by a story of resilience and hidden wisdom. The elixir she brought back was not merely her freedom, but a valuable lesson for Helena, and, by extension, for all who witnessed her journey, even indirectly. The lesson was clear: a person's worth is not defined by their age, their appearance, or the assumptions of others, but by the strength of their character, the depth of their wisdom, and the resilience of their spirit. Dona Clara's resurrection was a reaffirmation of her identity and her strength, proving that true power lies in self-belief and the ability to navigate life's challenges with grace and determination. Her story became a silent yet powerful testament to the importance of looking beyond appearances, honoring the wisdom accumulated over the years, and recognizing the unwavering strength residing in the heart of each individual, regardless of their circumstances. Dona Clara's legacy was the demonstration that true wealth is not measured in material possessions, but in the capacity to love, to learn, and to rise again, always. The daughter's perception of the need to manage her mother's finances was not an act of premeditated malice, but rather the manifestation of a profound, acquired blindness. Helena had grown up immersed in a world where financial security was frequently associated with dependency, where autonomy was seen as an inherent risk of advanced age. Her own trajectory, marked by business challenges and the constant pressure for results, had led her to believe that control was synonymous with protection. She could not conceive that her mother, the figure she had always associated with care and comfort, could possess a financial acumen that rivaled, or even surpassed, her own. The house, which for Helena represented a potential hotbed of accidents and oversights, was, in reality, the epicenter of a meticulously managed investment network, a testament to Dona Clara's strategic vision. This disparity in perceptions created a barrier, a cognitive dissonance that prevented Helena from seeing the reality behind the appearances. What Helena failed to grasp was that Dona Clara's discretion wasn't a reflection of fragility, but rather of a wisdom forged over decades of experience in a cutthroat business environment. In her youth, Dona Clara had navigated a world where women were frequently underestimated, where their ambitions were met with skepticism. To thrive, she had to cultivate a sharp observational acuity, an aptitude for anticipating moves, and an unyielding resilience. She had learned that ostentation was an invitation to vulnerability, and that true strength lay in subtlety and strategic intelligence. Her investments, often in burgeoning, high-potential sectors, were the fruits of deep analysis and refined intuition, qualities Helena, in her youthful exuberance and amidst her own pressures, had yet to fully develop. The apparent simplicity of her lifestyle was, therefore, a conscious choice, a means of maintaining focus on her objectives and eschewing unnecessary distractions. The conversation about finances, prompted by Helena's anxieties, became, for Dona Clara, an opportunity for inoculation, a way to gradually introduce a new perspective without causing undue shock. She didn't immediately reveal the extent of her wealth, knowing it could be misconstrued as a bid for validation or, worse, a veiled critique of Helena's own financial standing. Instead, Dona Clara began to introduce investment concepts with calculated subtlety, employing hypothetical examples and market scenarios to gauge her daughter's understanding and receptiveness. She keenly observed Helena's reactions, the questions she posed, the hesitations she displayed. It was a delicate chess match, each move carefully considered to avoid direct confrontation, yet paving the way for a gradual, constructive revelation. The house, which Helena perceived as a labyrinth of potential pitfalls, was, in reality, the operational hub of a brilliant financial mind, a testament to the order and control Dona Clara exerted over her own destiny. Helena's need to protect her mother stemmed largely from a projection of her own anxieties and insecurities. The pressure to keep her company afloat, the constant market uncertainty, all of it fueled in Helena a need for control, a belief that order and predictability were the only safeguards against chaos. She viewed her mother's independence as a form of unpredictability, a factor that added another layer of concern to her already complex life. Now, by introducing her own financial acumen, Dona Clara wasn't merely seeking to reassert her capability, but also to offer Helena a new tool, a fresh perspective that might help her navigate her own pressures. It was an act of love, a desire to share the wisdom she had acquired, not to prove herself superior, but to strengthen the bonds between them and to show Helena that strength and security can indeed come from unexpected sources. Therefore, rather than confronting her daughter directly with the magnitude of her wealth, Dona Clara opted for a more subtle approach, one aimed at educating and empowering Helena. She realized that the true wealth she could offer wasn't the money itself, but the knowledge and confidence that came with it. That period of forced seclusion, paradoxically, became a time of profound connection and mutual learning. Dona Clara was, in effect, managing her investments, but she was also managing her daughter's perception, gradually dismantling the assumptions that had led her to make that drastic decision. This was a long-term investment, one that promised a far greater return than any financial gain, the restoration of truth and the rebuilding of a relationship founded on mutual understanding. Dona Clara's strategy, rather than a bombastic revelation of her fortune, focused on the art of subtle persuasion, employing influence techniques she had honed over years of complex negotiations. She understood that her daughter, immersed in her own financial concerns, was receptive to practical solutions, to concrete advice that could alleviate her burden. Hence, Dona Clara began to share anecdotes from her own past challenges, not as displays of superiority, but as case studies on how she had overcome similar adversities. She recounted, for instance, an early period in her career when market volatility threatened to destabilize her nascent businesses, detailing the financial maneuvers and strategic investments that allowed her not only to survive, but to thrive. This approach enabled Helena to see, indirectly, the depth of her mother's experience and knowledge, without her mother feeling compelled to confess the extent of her wealth. Furthermore, Dona Clara introduced the concept of portfolio diversification with a vivid analogy, comparing personal finance management to a well-tended garden. Just as a gardener doesn't place all their hopes on a single plant species, but cultivates a variety of flowers and vegetables that thrive under different conditions, a prudent investor must diversify their assets to mitigate risks and maximize returns. She explained how different asset classes, such as stocks, bonds, and real estate, function like distinct plants, each with its own growth cycle and return potential. This metaphor helped Helena visualize the principles of asset allocation in a more tangible and accessible manner, contrasting with the more abstract and sometimes precarious approach Helena had been considering for her own ventures. Consequently, Dona Clara began posing targeted questions about Helena's investments, not with the intent to criticize, but to foster contemplation. She inquired about the rationale underpinning Helena's decisions, the inherent risks, and contingency plans. For instance, when Helena mentioned a speculative investment in a new tech startup, Dona Clara didn't directly dissuade her. Instead, she mused aloud about the significance of thorough market analysis, the necessity of assessing the long-term viability of such disruptive technologies, and the prudence of allocating only a fraction of total capital to high-risk assets. This approach, which prioritized questioning over dictation, allowed Helena to arrive at her own conclusions, guided by her mother's implicit wisdom. In contrast, Dona Clara also delved into the importance of risk management, drawing on a personal anecdote from her own life, the construction of her first factory. She recounted the logistical and financial hurdles she encountered, and how anticipating potential issues, from material delivery delays to unexpected fluctuations in production costs, prompted her to devise robust contingency plans. She explained how these plans weren't a sign of pessimism, but a demonstration of preparedness and responsibility, ensuring the business could weather unforeseen circumstances without compromising its financial stability. This personal narrative served to illustrate that risk management isn't about avoiding challenges, but about being equipped to confront them with confidence and resilience. Another crucial layer Dona Clara addressed was the importance of patience and long-term vision. She contrasted the get-rich-quick mentality, which seemed to allure Helena in her youth, with the sustainable investment philosophy she herself had always practiced. She described how, in her early years, she was often tempted to pursue faster returns, but had learned, through past experiences, that true wealth is built gradually, with discipline and consistency. She used the metaphor of an old-growth tree. While a fast-growing plant might offer fruit in one season, a robust, well-established tree provides shade and sustenance for generations. This analogy reinforced the idea that sound investments require time to mature and yield lasting results, a lesson Dona Clara was eager to impart to her daughter. The complexity of wealth management, beyond mere accumulation, lies in its capacity to perpetuate values and shape legacies. Dona Clara, in discoursing on the importance of a personal, dividend policy, wasn't just referring to profit distribution, but to the manner in which an individual chooses to reinvest their resources, be they financial, emotional, or intellectual, into the spheres that truly matter. She explained to Helena that wealth, in its broadest conception, was a vehicle for the flourishing not only of the individual, but also of the community and future generations. For her, true financial wisdom manifested in the art of cultivating a garden of solid relationships and purposeful initiatives, where every investment, every act of generosity, was a seed planted for a more prosperous and equitable future. In this way, she illustrated how allocating resources to support young entrepreneurs, for instance, was not merely an act of philanthropy, but a strategic investment in human capital. By providing mentorship, access to networks, and in some cases, seed capital, Dona Clara felt she was replicating the very process that had led to her own success. She described how, in her early forays into the business world, the guidance of experienced mentors and the support of investors who believed in her potential were crucial. This reciprocity, this chain of value creation, was, to her, the essence of an enduring legacy. Now, consider how this applies when you face the decision to invest in a project with high potential for social impact. It's not just about financial return, but about nurturing an ecosystem where new ideas can flourish and where individual success contributes to collective well-being. Furthermore, Dona Clara underscored the imperative of cultivating an emotional and intellectual resilience reserve, positing it as equally vital as a financial reserve. She likened this reserve to an emergency fund for the soul, a compendium of practices and habits that fortify the mind and spirit when confronted with life's inevitable adversities. For her, this encompassed everything from an unwavering commitment to reading and continuous learning, which keeps the mind sharp and adaptable, to the maintenance of robust interpersonal relationships, which provide crucial support and perspective during times of crisis. She recounted how, during periods of profound economic uncertainty, it was her conversations with long-standing friends and her immersion in historical and philosophical texts that furnished her with the requisite clarity and fortitude to make considered decisions, rather than succumbing to panic. Consequently, in her estimation, wealth management transcended mere accounting of assets and liabilities. It constituted a life philosophy, a steadfast dedication to personal growth and to making a positive contribution to the world. She elucidated to Helena that the true measure of her affluence was not to be found in the quantity of possessions she held, but rather in the quality of life she was able to afford herself and others, and in the beneficial impact her actions generated. This holistic perspective, which integrated financial, emotional, and social dimensions, served as the bedrock of her long-term strategy. Now, contemplate how this approach might revolutionize your own conception of success. What does building a legacy truly signify to you? What are the values you aspire to perpetuate through your deeds and choices? On another note, Dona Clara also addressed the significance of adaptation and flexibility in an ever-evolving world. She employed the metaphor of a flowing river, likening the global economy to a dynamic body of water, its currents and tides in perpetual flux. To navigate successfully, she contended, one must emulate an agile vessel, capable of adjusting its sails and altering its course in accordance with prevailing weather conditions. She narrated how, throughout her career, she had been compelled to reassess and restructure her investments on numerous occasions, adapting to emerging technologies, regulatory shifts, and unforeseen geopolitical events. This capacity for anticipating trends and proactively adjusting, as opposed to reactively responding, was the linchpin in ensuring the longevity and prosperity of her estate. Financial acumen, from Dona Clara's perspective, extended to understanding the intricate dance between liquidity and sustainable growth. She explained to Helena that maintaining a substantial cash reserve wasn't a sign of risk aversion, but rather a calculated strategy to capitalize on unexpected opportunities and mitigate the impact of economic shocks. Much like an experienced navigator keeps a steady helm and an adjustable sail to respond to changing winds, a shrewd investor must balance the need for immediate access to funds with the potential for long-term capital appreciation. She illustrated this with the acquisition of a strategic plot of land years ago, an investment that, at the time, seemed questionable due to its low immediate liquidity. However, by patiently awaiting market appreciation and urban expansion in the area, Dona Clara managed to transform a relatively stagnant asset into a significant income stream, providing the necessary capital to expand her businesses at a crucial juncture. This approach, which prioritized strategic patience over speculative gain, was the antithesis of the frenetic pursuit of quick returns that sometimes ensnared Helena. Furthermore, Dona Clara addressed the importance of risk dilution, not just in terms of diversifying asset classes, but also in managing human capital within an organization. She explained that relying too heavily on a single individual, no matter how talented, created a structural vulnerability. Just as a farmer doesn't plant only one type of seed in their fields, lest a specific pest could decimate the entire crop, a wise business leader must cultivate a team diverse in skills and experience. She recounted how, on one occasion, the sudden illness of a key manager threatened to paralyze a critical operation. Fortunately, due to her ongoing investment in talent development across different departments and the fostering of a culture of collaboration and shared knowledge, the company was able to redistribute responsibilities and maintain operational continuity without significant disruption. This talent reserve strategy was not merely a safeguard, but a catalyst for innovation, as it allowed diverse perspectives to intersect and generate novel ideas. In contrast, Dona Clara also highlighted the necessity of cultivating a proactive, market intelligence, which extends beyond the mere analysis of historical data. She explained that the future rarely resembles the past in a linear fashion, and that staying attuned to emerging megatrends such as technological advancements, demographic shifts, and geopolitical transformations is crucial for anticipating disruptions and identifying new opportunities. She shared her experience observing the emergence of the Internet in the 1990s and 2000s. While many of her contemporaries viewed the technology as a secondary tool, Dona Clara recognized its transformative potential and began investing in technology companies and adapting her own business models to incorporate e-commerce. This anticipatory vision allowed her to stay ahead of the curve, capitalizing on changes rather than falling victim to them. Now, consider how this mindset can be applied when you assess the potential of a new market or the viability of a new product line. What emerging trends should you be monitoring? On the other hand, Dona Clara stressed the importance of robust corporate governance, even in privately held companies or family enterprises. She explained that establishing clear decision-making structures, with well-defined roles and responsibilities, was fundamental to avoiding conflicts, ensuring transparency, and fostering trust among stakeholders. She recounted how, in her early years, the absence of formal partnership agreements led to significant disagreements with business partners, which nearly compromised the company's stability. From this painful experience, she implemented an advisory board composed of independent and experienced professionals, who offered an objective perspective and helped mediate any divergences. This governance structure was not seen as unnecessary bureaucracy, but as an essential mechanism for the longevity and sustainable success of the business, ensuring that decisions were made based on prudence and merit, rather than emotions or personal interests. In Dona Clara's view, managing a financial legacy transcended mere capital accumulation. It was about nurturing an ecosystem of prosperity intended to endure for generations. She would explain to Helena that true wisdom lay not in hoarding wealth, but in strategically channeling it towards the flourishing of new ventures and the strengthening of communities. She likened this process to the art of viticulture. A skilled vintner doesn't just harvest grapes, but meticulously selects the finest, tends to the soil, prunes the vines with precision, and invests in fermentation technologies to ensure an exceptionally high-quality wine that not only satisfies immediate palates, but also ages gracefully and gains complexity over time. Similarly, Dona Clara viewed her investments in startups and social projects as the selection and cultivation of promising grapes, patiently awaiting their maturation and the yielding of fruits for a richer, more intricate future. In this vein, Dona Clara underscored the paramount importance of due diligence, extending beyond mere financial scrutiny to encompass the assessment of human capital and the integrity of business partners. She recounted how, on one occasion, she nearly invested in a burgeoning technology firm, but a more in-depth investigation unearthed an organizational culture rife with internal conflicts and a marked lack of transparency. Although the figures were enticing, Dona Clara ultimately decided to withdraw, comprehending that a business lacking a robust foundation of trust and collaboration was destined for failure, irrespective of its market potential. She likened this situation to constructing a house upon shifting sands. No matter how aesthetically pleasing the facade, the structure would not withstand the test of time. Therefore, when evaluating a new venture henceforth, consider how the caliber of the individuals involved and the solidity of their values can be as crucial as the project's economic viability. Furthermore, Dona Clara addressed the necessity of adaptive risk management, acknowledging the ever-shifting nature of the economic and social landscape. She elaborated that rather than devising rigid, inflexible plans, it was more prudent to develop a suite of forward-looking scenarios and corresponding response strategies for each. She recounted how, by anticipating the economy's increasing digitalization, she began diversifying her investments to include software companies and e-commerce platforms, even before these trends became overtly apparent. This proactive approach not only shielded her from the risks of obsolescence inherent in traditional business models, but also enabled her to capitalize on emerging opportunities, navigating uncertainties with a well-defined strategic compass. On the other hand, Dona Clara also underscored the importance of cultivating a sharp, emotional intelligence within the financial realm. She explained that investment decisions are not purely rational, they are frequently swayed by emotions such as fear, greed, and excessive optimism. She shared how, in her youth, she witnessed investors panic during market downturns, selling their assets at bargain prices, only to see their values rapidly rebound. Likewise, she observed others succumb to greed, heavily wagering on speculative bubbles that inevitably burst. Dona Clara, for her part, fostered a disciplined approach, grounded in sound principles and a long-term perspective, resisting the allure of impulsive moves. She understood that the capacity to govern one's own emotions was as vital as the analysis of financial data. Now, consider how your own emotions might influence your financial decisions. What emotional triggers do you need to recognize and manage to make more considered and effective choices? Reflecting on this journey thus far, we perceive how the threads of a complex tapestry begin to interweave, not in a mere repetition of what has been seen, but in a convergence that illuminates a path forward. Dona Clara's journey, initially marked by an apparent fragility imposed by the external world, revealed itself as a profound exploration of inherent resilience and the wisdom accumulated over a lifetime of experiences. The insights that emerged, far from being mere echoes of the past, resonate with a newfound clarity, shaping the understanding of what truly constitutes an individual's strength and value. As the nuances of financial management and the depth of familial relationships were unfolded, it became evident that true wealth transcends the mere accumulation of material possessions. It manifests in the capacity to nurture not only financial capital, but also human and emotional capital, cultivating a legacy that extends beyond the present moment. The way in which life's lessons were applied, not as mere advice, but as practical demonstrations of an existential philosophy, suggests a wisdom that adapts and thrives in a constantly shifting world. In this perspective, the journey guides us to a point where apparent contradictions resolve themselves, and layers of meaning deepen. The manner in which strategic decisions were made, always with an eye towards the future and long-term impact, reveals an intelligence that anticipates challenges and capitalizes on opportunities, weaving a safety net that shields against uncertainties. The ability to navigate the complexities of both the market and interpersonal relationships with equal mastery demonstrates a holistic understanding of what it means to build and sustain a truly enduring legacy. Observing the way the various facets of Dona Clara's life intertwined, from the management of her enterprises to the delicate web of her familial relationships, reveals a pattern of purpose and intention. Her lived experiences, the challenges overcome, and the lessons learned were not isolated occurrences, but rather components of a grander mosaic, the pieces of which, now assembled, paint a picture of extraordinary depth and significance. The convergence of these insights primes us for final contemplation, for the comprehension of what truly emerges when sagacity encounters resilience. Dona Clara's journey, in its apparent simplicity, unfolds as a complex tapestry of wisdom, fortitude, and a love that transcends convention. What commenced as a narrative of enforced confinement, imposed by a daughter's lack of understanding, transmuted into a profound tutelage on the genuine essence of strength and worth. Wealth, as Dona Clara masterfully demonstrated, is not solely quantifiable by tangible assets, but by the profundity of intellect, the steadfastness of values, and the unshakable capacity to nurture and foster potential, both within oneself and in others. The home, which to Helena represented a token of fragility and precariousness, proved to be the sanctuary of a sharp mind, an indomitable spirit, forged through decades of trials and triumphs. The quintessential lesson, however, lies not merely in Dona Clara's concealed fortune, but in the manner she leveraged it to cultivate not only her own well-being, but also to sow seeds of growth and comprehension within her daughter's heart. Her strategy eschewed confrontation, favoring instead subtle education, a practical exhibition of a life philosophy wherein patience, adaptability, and long-term vision serve as the cornerstones of an enduring legacy. She imparts to us that financial acumen is inextricably linked with emotional intelligence and integrity, and that genuine prosperity manifests in the ability to construct bridges of understanding, to nurture relationships, and to invest in human potential, thereby engendering a virtuous cycle of growth and positive impact. Dona Clara's legacy, consequently, constitutes an invitation to introspection. It compels us to look beyond superficial appearances, to scrutinize our own preconceived notions, and to recognize the inherent power residing in the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime. Wealth, at its core, is an instrument, not an end in itself. It is the tool which, in capable hands, can be wielded to construct not only fortunes, but also to reinforce bonds, to galvanize change, and to leave a positive imprint that resonates across generations. Dona Clara's narrative serves as a potent reminder that the greatest wealth we can cultivate is that which resides within our character, our capacity for love, and our unwavering resolve to perceive the best in ourselves and in the world around us. The real practice begins now, that of looking at the people in our lives with the same depth and understanding that Dona Clara demonstrated, of valuing the wisdom that resides in each experience, and of cultivating our own legacies, not just with financial intelligence, but with heart and purpose. May Dona Clara's journey inspire us to be the architects of our own stories, building a future where richness of spirit and generosity of action flourish abundantly. If you enjoyed this story, please like it, leave a comment, and share it with friends and family. Until the next video.